Hey, welcome to the AZ Political Podcast. I'm Jim Sharpe. Our headlines this week. Well, headline number one, Republican candidate for governor Karrin Taylor Robson has started running commercials for a general election that won't even take place for 18 months. In that ad, she touts her Donald Trump endorsement, despite the fact that Trump has also endorsed Robson's likely opponent in that gubernatorial race, current Congressman Andy Biggs. Headline number two, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders officially endorsed Pima County Supervisor Adelita Grijalva for the special election to replace her late father, Raul Grijalva, in Congress. Sanders, who's one of the most liberal members of Congress, said in a statement, quote, "At a time when Trump, Musk, and their billionaire gang are attacking our democracy and ripping off the working class, we need leaders who have the backbone to take them on." The primary election, by the way, for Arizona's 7th congressional district is scheduled for July 15th. And headline number three, two of Arizona's top public health officials resigned this week in order to avoid their confirmation hearings at the legislature after Governor Hobbs announced that the women who head up the Arizona Department of Health Services and Arizona's Medicaid program had stepped down from their positions. She said, quote, "The people of Arizona are tired of the relentless politics that have undermined good governance in the name of partisan retribution." An obvious shot at Senator Jake Hoffman, who leads the state Senate's Committee on Director Nominations. All right, let's get to our guest this week, Matt Kenney. Matt, welcome back. Matt is a partner in the PR, public affairs, and political strategy firm Echo Canyon Consulting. He formerly served as both a senior advisor for and the executive director of the Arizona Republican Party. Most importantly, though, Matt is a U.S. Army combat veteran, an officer who served during Operation Iraqi Freedom, and in the 1st Advise and Assist Battalion during Operation New Dawn. That was the follow-up to OIF. Matt serves on the Arizona Military Affairs Commission. So welcome back, Matt Kenney, to the AZ Political Podcast.
Jim, thank you so much for having me on.
I know that was painful watching me read those headlines because it was just a cluster today. I don't know what's going on. Hey, listen, I don't mean to make light of it or anybody's service, but since, like you, I've been in both, I'll ask you, what's nastier, a Republican primary in Arizona or combat?
Well, I think that they're nasty in completely different ways.
Yeah.
Combat itself, all the people around you, I think, have your back, are looking out for you. In a Republican primary, I think you're not sure.
I don't know who's going to be stabbing you in the back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So a little bit different. I'd say I'd probably feel more confident in a combat zone than I might in a Republican primary these days.
Yeah, it's definitely a different world, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about that Robson ad. In fact, let's watch a couple moments of it if we can first.
Conservative businesswoman Karrin Taylor Robson is running for governor, and she has President Trump's complete and total endorsement.
Karrin Robson, where is Karrin? Are you running for governor? If you do, you're going to have my support.
Karrin Taylor Robson is answering President Trump's call.
Okay, Matt, that ad says that she has President Trump's, and I'm quoting here, complete and total endorsement. Can she really say that, considering Trump is also endorsing Congressman Andy Biggs in the 2026 governor's race? And isn't it too early, endorsement or not, for anybody to be running an ad for an election that won't happen for 18 more months?
Yeah, I think something that we've learned is that Donald Trump doesn't do things that we normally see. This isn't the first time that he's double endorsed. We saw it in that congressional race where he had endorsed Congressman Abe Hamadeh, and then later on, closer to the election day, he endorsed Blake Masters, and Abe Hamadeh himself came out victorious in that race.
Right.
I can't speak to what President Trump was thinking or when he does the double endorsement. I think what he's saying is both of these candidates would be really strong, and I support both of them. But I would point out, too, that President Trump, from the stage, encouraged Karrin Taylor Robson to run for the governorship.
Right.
I'm not sure that we have the same example for Congressman Andy Biggs.
Yeah, no, he was here, I think in December at Dream City Church,
He was, yeah.
doing that event. And he actually said, are you going to run? If you run, I'm behind you, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But then it's got to be a little bit of a disappointment to the candidate. I've worked with plenty of candidates too. It's got to be a bit of a disappointment to the candidate. Then all of a sudden you're like, you what?
Yeah.
You're dating somebody else? What's going on here?
One of the things that I really thought about too is whether or not it would have been helpful in the 22 election. And I think that if Karrin Taylor Robson had a dual endorsement then she would have been our governor now. So I kind of look at it like that, and I'm not sure that It has a negative impact on Karrin Taylor Robson's race. I think that it doesn't change anything, and she's probably in the best position to win. And I think a lot of that has to do with Republicans wanting somebody that can win in the general election.
You texted me about the financials. So the stuff that has to be filed with the state, talking about how much you have brought in and how much you have in your coffers. Robson, she's got a pretty well-to-do husband. She's no slacker herself when it comes to having a few bucks in the bank. Is she doing that much better than Biggs at this point?
Well, so let's compare the numbers. And I want to highlight, too, that I don't think that that there were personal contributions into the campaign yet, too. So these are all donors that want to support Karrin Taylor Robson and donors that want to support Andy Biggs, too. And I would point out, I think that Karrin Taylor Robson's campaign had raised around $800,000. But then if you didn't notice, too, that there's a super PAC already out there with already $900,000. So if you put those two together, she's raised at least over $1.5 million in the first, couple weeks of the race compared to Andy Biggs's, was it 160 or 170,000? So it's somewhere between 10 and 15% of what Karrin Taylor Robson raised.
Yeah.
Right. So for him, I think that this is his low-hanging fruit, right? Like, these are the people that support you already, the donors that have been with you for a really long time. And I would think that would be a really concerning number if, like, your low-hanging fruit, the people that you went to and you ended up with about 15% of what the other candidate has raised so far. I think to President Trump, one of the most important things is that you're going to have the finances to win in the general. And I think that at the end of the day, Karrin Taylor Robson is a better fundraiser with broader support.
Okay. So, that was basically my next question is, let's talk about Biggs versus Hobbs. Who do you think wins this? And do both of them even end up in the primary at the end of the day? Or does or do the other drop out, do you think? And I guess in your view, it would probably be Biggs, but does Biggs make it all the way to primary day?
Well, we'll see about that. He does have the backing of some of the grassroots organizations too, and that makes it difficult for you to drop out when you've kind of become the champion of the grassroots base, and that's sort of where he lived his whole career, was with that base, and so I think it'd be really difficult for him to drop out. Karrin Taylor Robson, I think that she's got all of the support in the world, and there'd be no reason for her to leave the race. So I don't see any incentive or reason why we would see, her exit the primary. I think she's in the strongest position. But, anything could happen these days, and that's kind of what we're looking at.
We're living in Donald Trump's world and just observing. So anything could happen.
You brought up the TV ads too, and the first thing that came to mind is how much elections and politics have changed, especially over the last 10 years, and the impacts that social media and the 24-hour news cycle have happened.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that we're, seeing discussions about the presidential race already, on the Democrat side at least.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so what I think that the running of TV ads earlier and earlier, to me, is more of an indication of where politics and elections are going now, as opposed to whether or not she may be doing this too early. I think, in fact, this is just the beginning of a sustained advertising campaign from the candidate.
So we're not going to see a big bunch of ads now and then a big pause for a while. This is going to be ongoing.
Well, and
get used to Karrin Taylor Robson's
I think
face
get
on your
used to
screen.
Karrin Taylor Robson. Well, on your screen, I think on your phone, on the radio too. We have lots of different mediums out there for us to talk to the electorate. And so I imagine that the campaign is going to be maybe doing some TV here, doing a lot of digital, jumping back on TV. You can't stay on TV for 18 months straight, but you definitely can continue to build up your support and your name ID. And, it does really help with the fundraising too.
Yeah.
So it plays multiple roles.
Right. It keeps you in voters' minds, but it also keeps you in donors' minds, and all those things.
Shows health in the campain as well, right?
Yeah. It's not just her going, I got so much money, I don't know what to do with it. I better start running ads now. We got a year and a half to go, or more than a year. Yeah. So, so we're adding a new office to state government, a new statewide office to state government. Lieutenant governor.
Yeah.
Arizona will have a lieutenant governor for the first time in 2026. This was passed by voters a few years ago. And I guess, and we'll do it the same way they do it at the national level with a vice president. So you'll be running on a ticket with a gubernatorial candidate, and then you'll be the vice gubernatorial candidate. I don't know. But is anybody going to want that job?
Well, I think, this is one of the most exciting things that's kind of going on in Arizona because it's so fresh and so new. And I'm really interested to see, how it gets utilized by the campaigns and the candidates. Traditional thinking and the way that the statute is set up, you would think that they would pick somebody that would make them stronger in the general. Mm-hmm. But in the primary, currently, you have two candidates, and they may want to use that as a tool to take advantage to get an advantage over the other candidate, kind of show the strength of their campaign or the broadness of the campaign and the focus on the electorate. So it is really interesting, but there are a ton of, I think, really...
So real quick, I want to explain. So that makes it different than president and vice president, because usually the president has secured the nomination, even if he hasn't gone to the convention yet. Yeah. The candidate has secured the nomination before he decides on who his running mate will be. But in the gubernatorial race, you don't actually get the nomination until you win the primary. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it kind of does shake out a little differently.
Yeah. And I wonder if there are going to be candidates now or in cycles in the future who campaign for lieutenant governor.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what impact that makes to individuals who are seeking like the Secretary of State nomination or office itself. It really does throw a wrench into Arizona politics, and I think it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. There are lots of, I think, really good former elected officials who probably would like to be the lieutenant governor and have that opportunity. I think in a lot of other states, it does, act as a stepping stone to run for governor. Mm-hmm. You've been there, you've been, in a previous administration, seeing how the state government works from the executive level. And so you come in with that type of experience, and that may be valuable to some people. But yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. And it does. It really colors your decision to run for Secretary of State, who was effectively the lieutenant governor up until this next election cycle. So could you see, let's say Robson comes out on top in the primary and has not picked her running mate for lieutenant governor at that point? Could you see somebody like Andy Biggs, who's served in federal office, going, yeah, okay, I'll be your lieutenant governor?
So I think the situation is probably going to dictate. Whoever wins the primary is going to probably have to look at, are they going to lose a section of the primary electorate that just doesn't like them? Do they need to shore that side up? Mm. That could be important. And a lot of analysts have looked at the elections recently and said that it was more about base turnout. It's going to be a non-presidential year election.
Right.
And so, I think that surely is a possibility.
Yeah. And I guess that's also a way to maybe convince someone who might otherwise pull votes away from you to drop out of the race and become part of your deal.
That's definitely true. I would make the case, too, that it's an opportunity to maybe broaden your appeal in a general election, too. And so you could possibly see a conservative Republican candidate or a progressive Democrat, tack more to the middle by choosing a candidate that's more moderate.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the same way that's what presidential candidates do with the vice presidents.
And that's what I kind of mean. Well, in President Trump and Pence's case, it was, you know what I mean? It was him shoring up kind of his
Didn't really work out so well for Pence, though, did it? Yeah, no, not exactly. So, and I do want to talk, overall about 2026, even though we're still a long ways away from that, right? But because it seems so much of the Democratic candidates have already figured out what they're doing, and tell me if I'm wrong on this. I have a friend who says Democrats in Arizona have way more restraint than Republicans do. Like the Democrats figure out who's going to run for what, and then they all step out of each other's way. And Republicans, and that's what I was talking about, combat versus a Republican primary. The Republicans scratch each other's eyes out to get into office.
I actually don't think that it really has that much to do with the political parties as much as it has to do with who's in the majority and the minority and why that kind of functions that way. We've seen it in other states too, where it's the other way around. I think that the Democrats are like, this is our one shot. We need to get together and we need to, make sure that we beat the status quo or the incumbent, right? I think that Republicans look at it and they're like, in Republican primaries in safe Republican districts especially, they're like, this is a sure thing. We're going to battle it out in the primary because we know that, you can win in the general. So I think a lot of it has to do with that. But I think in Arizona, you do see a decent amount of that. I would say that the Democratic Party over the last couple of weeks seems to be having some serious problems and serious infighting on their own. That's more party level versus senior leadership. You saw the letter or the email that went out from party leadership, and it was really criticizing Senator Kelly and and Senator Gallego. And anyway, so we all have our own problems. I think that Republicans love to duke it out, and they like to fight. And so it makes things more exciting, and I think that there is a silver lining to the difficult primaries. It really does energize the campaign teams and the volunteers too, and so they feel like it was a hard-earned victory when they do win, and I think that they're even more passionate when they get into the general election.
And it probably is, funded a few vacations for you as well, right?
No.
You're just scraping by? Is that what you're telling me, Matt?
I work really hard, but most of my work is outside of politics, and it's more public and government affairs type of stuff.
So let's talk then. And this, I was just trying to point that out because there's not really a whole lot of speculation going on with who's going to run out of the Democratic Party right now when it comes to at least the top 5 offices in Arizona. I'm just pointing that out so that everybody, I don't get a bunch of emails like you're a one-sided hack, Sharpe. But I got to ask about Kimberly Yee, the state treasurer, Republican. What's her future look like with Karrin Taylor Robson and Andy Biggs both running for governor? She attempted a run for governor in 2022, and Kari Lake being in the race just made it obvious to her, I'm going to go back and I'm going to run for re-election in the treasurer's office. But she also got the most votes of any Republican in Arizona in 2022. This is obviously a popular person. Where does she go? Does she end up in that lieutenant governor slot?
Yeah. Don't you think it's interesting that she ended up with the most votes and, she had, one of the quietest campaigns out there.
Yeah.
So what does that say about sort of our electorate and like what we're doing in the campaigns?
You're like, you weren't on my TV all the time. Right. You didn't flood my social media. Thank you. I'm voting for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think she probably makes a really appealing lieutenant governor candidate. I'm not sure if she wants to continue to serve in that capacity, but she has for a really long time. She was my state senator too, and I think she does a really good job as a politician and trying not to get into the controversies. She's a really great candidate. I could see her being chosen by either candidate for the lieutenant governor position, but there are also other positions out there available that she'd probably be really great in. She might also just go into the private sector after being treasurer. I'm sure there's some firms who'd love to have her.
Well, I don't know how many bazillions of dollars she controls, but why not?
Yeah.
Does she take a shot at Secretary of State?
That's a really good question. I think that she would be a formidable candidate against Adrian Fontes, and I'd love to see it. I'd vote for her. I'd root for her.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And not just because you're Army and Adrian Fontes is Marines?
Well, I think that, and I've kind of thought that Adrian Fontes has a lot of strengths, but at the same time, I think he takes maybe some risks that he shouldn't have. You remember at Maricopa County, you had, at the time, Secretary of State Hobbs, and the county recorder kind of shut down what he was trying to do with the mail-in ballots. He's had a few losses, I think, as Secretary of State around different election-related things, and I'd like to see somebody that was less partisan in that role, and I think that Kimberly actually plays that part really well.
Yeah, no, I think if you were to ask a few people, they might say, I don't know what party she is. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, if we could, I'm trying to think of the ad campaign that tells everybody we're not going to inundate you with an ad campaign so that you win the election, because we're not going to. The only thing I can think of that comes close is when Jeff DeWitt ran for treasurer in Arizona, and he touted the fact that he only has one T in his last name, and it would save money on printing at the state. So that's why you wanted to vote for Jeff DeWitt.
That's pretty funny.
That's pretty brilliant.
Yeah,
I really did.
You just reminded me. He had the campaign video too, like get out and vote. Through to the song of Frozen with his family.
Right. Yeah.
That was a good move.
That guy liked to have some fun.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I like that. Are you predicting any surprises? Is there anything that would blow your mind that would happen between now and 2026?
I grew up down in Tucson, and
we like you anyway. But
yeah. I came up here for college, which has been difficult with my family ever since.
I'm sure.
My mom is a wildcat too. She makes me take my ASU hat off when I get down there. It's rough.
It's not just take your hat off in the house. Take that hat off.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So I've been watching closely. Look, I think that Daniel Hernandez, could potentially come out on top against she's not an entrenched incumbent, but with the family name and the political operation they've had in Southern Arizona for as long as they have. But I honestly feel like Tucsonans are looking for a change, and I'm curious
Raul
if that might show
was
it.
there for what? I want to say 2 decades.
Yeah.
And I didn't mention this in my headlines, but when I said Bernie Sanders is one of the most liberal members of Congress, I feel like he even moved up on that rank after Raul Grijalva passed away, because he was one of the most liberal members of Congress.
Yeah, he was, and I don't think that reflects the electorate down in Tucson, or at least it doesn't anymore. I think that Daniel Hernandez has already demonstrated an ability to be, business friendly and try to bring in development and improve the jurisdictions that he's in charge of, and so I think that that'll be a super interesting race to see if Daniel Hernandez can pull off a primary over all the odds.
Yeah. For those who might not remember because they were too young or they weren't around, he basically saved Gabby Gifford's life by giving her life-saving measures after she'd been shot in the head in that Safeway parking lot.
He's no stranger to Tucson. And
yeah. No, and he's run for before, though, and hasn't won. So, I guess I'm wrong. I thought he ran for Congress at one point, but maybe he didn't. I know he served in the state legislature, but
he did.
I don't know. So, that's an interesting thought. That might, but that's not even 2026. That's coming up, in July of this year, that special election. So, we might get a surprise that much sooner. Anybody that you think I might not have heard of that I should keep an eye out for 2026 statewide elections?
Are
you thinking of running at all? Okay.
I don't know what I would run for. What would you want me to run for?
Provost of U of A?
There should just be some veteran or military post where I could go and just help veterans and military and the DOD or something. If we come up with one of those, maybe I'll run for office. I do think it'll be interesting to see who ends up running for treasurer. You saw Elijah Norton on the Republican side has jumped in, but I haven't seen any Democrats yet. I mean, the most exciting was really, what was going to happen with the Democratic gubernatorial race and whether or not, Chris Mays was going to jump in there, or Adrian Fontes. It seems like that's been pretty settled.
Yeah, so they're both going to, I mean, they're pretty assured of winning their primary. So is there any formidable Republican candidates on that side? Either of those two offices, Attorney General?
Yeah, so what I've heard on Attorney General is you've got Senate President Warren Peterson running, and you've got Rodney Glassman. He's a lawyer in town. He's an Air Force JAG. He's been really involved in politics in one way or the other every single cycle.
Mm-hmm. And he has my email address.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. He's a really hard worker, and he stays after it. I think that's going to be such an interesting race if you don't see anyone else jump in. I don't think that either of them look like a traditional attorney general candidate. I think that, Senate President Peterson is, I think, garnering the support of the grassroots in which he has appealed to his entire career. I think Rodney Glassman is going to try to appeal to the legal and the business community, but I don't think that either of them are going to, stay in their lane. I think they're going to mix it up. But that doesn't mean that you don't see other candidates jump in the race, because, neither of them have a tremendous amount of legal experience. Some would say that that's required for the job. You could say that it's a political and a policy position too, so I'm not sure that's necessary. But that doesn't mean that you don't see maybe an attorney with more experience try to jump in that race too. So that could be pretty exciting, the Attorney General's race.
I wanted to maybe finish up with one quick thing, and that is, Pete Hegseth. We've talked about him before.
Yeah, we did.
And the National Security Advisor has been asked to leave the White House, and he was part of. In fact, he's being blamed for inviting that Atlantic, editor for being on that Signal group chat that Hegseth was on. Is he going to be the next one to fall, do you think? Or do you think Pete Hegseth just stays in that job for, 2 or 3 years as Secretary of Defense? What do you think is going to happen to your friend?
I think President Trump trusts Pete Hegseth. I think he sees him as a good leader, and he's also, I think, really helped with some of the problems that the DoD has had. I think over the last couple of months, we've seen recruiting skyrocket too, and I think that was a really important role that he needed to play to inspire young people to join the military. I never thought, he was going to be there for the entirety of the Trump administration.
Most secretaries don't last that long anyway, but...
And I think, I've never been in the administration. I'm not sure how all that works, but if you're there to serve a purpose, and that purpose might be inspiring young people to join the military again, I think he checked that box. I'd like to see Trump stick by him. One of the things that you could tell is going on in Washington is this incredible amount of distrust among everybody, right? That's how we kick this off too, is kind of talking about what that's like.
Yeah.
I have some friends who have gone in too, and it does kind of sound like this is infighting related. And while we can blame you all in the media too, I think that we need to be able to trust each other, and I think that if Pete can find some really good people to put around him, I think he'll be there for longer.
If you were still active duty, would you be pleased that Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of Defense?
I would. There's also secretaries of the Army. Mm-hmm. There are, the largest chain of command probably in history, right? And so you have your different levels of leaders. I think that Pete Hegseth does a really good job in that role for what we currently need in this time.
Okay. Matt, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me on. I look forward to the next one.
Okay. Well, we'll see if there's a next one after you blame the media and stuff, huh? All right. Hey, I'm Jim Sharpe. Thanks for watching the AZ Political Podcast, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for watching the AZ Political Podcast with Jim Sharpe. Click the box to watch more from KTAR News and tap the button in the middle to subscribe.